The incomprehensible beauty and the wholeness and interconnectivity of every moment is an idea that's very hard to hold on to. Every moment that passes, like that second just gone now. That second, where my words first demanded its attention. That second, now falling further and further into our own unique pasts. In that moment, there was a truth to every interaction happening on Earth, a global happening, once here and now past. I was there, you were there, along with all else who chose to sit and listen to this with us. And in that second, did every conscious entity relate to all within its environment? In the second that was every passing thought and action being enacted by each and every single being, mankind or beastie. They were crossing roads, tying shoes, waking up, going to sleep, living a dream, living a nightmare, hiding from predators, capturing prey, riding highways and traversing bloodstreams. We gave birth, we died, and generally just lazed about. Every story, large or small, fell upon a truth that was that single second, all the way back there in our now shared pasts. And yet, this relational flux is something that is far more subtle than mere physicality alone, as relationships can move through both space and time in the most delicate of ways, as in how me, in my moment, when I first chose to write down those words, that second gone just now, was I, in acting through my own consciousness, able to echo a pattern into the future that is now affecting your own conscious experience and the resulting firing neurons. A non-classical transition of energetic potential contained not simply within the coarse matter, but within the idea. A meaningful idea of a second just past. And it's these subtleties that we shall now investigate in this chapter. So join me as I attempt to unpick the infinities of what is. It was 6 men of Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall." The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp. To me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear." The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out an eager hand, and felt about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain," quoth he. "'Tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree." The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "E'en the blindest man can tell what this resembles most, deny the fact who can. This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. As it was for those men of Indostan, it can be very difficult to determine what the nature of reality is beyond our perspective, especially when considering the relational variety that goes into shaping an experience. For instance, our visual navigation of the world appears to us as some form of reaching out into the environment. However, we all know that the image one sees is only the translation of information impacting upon our pupils, those two small windows suspended at head height. So that, as we move, our brains quite cleverly tell us that we are navigating a particular space when in truth, we are only ever accessing the immediately local wavefront of the greater electromagnetic pool. The upshot of which is that this greater space before us is not, in any global sense, what it appears to be for us, for this is only the world as known through perspective. But due to the simple fact that becoming aware of a more holistic picture, as if to see the entirety of the electromagnetic pool would actually be a far greater hindrance to our survival than help, our brains have evolved in such a way that they intentionally ignore the vast majority of their environment, thereby enabling a selection of information that stands relevant to their growth and survival. Without this, the world before us would be seen as one great homogeneous mess, with no ability for complex thought to arise. But beyond the boundaries encountered in perspective, nature has continuously been found to unfold along unbroken continuums, which is why we have found it necessary to see systems of being or becoming as mere relational cuts of the same ongoing happening. And indeed, it has been this very same process-relational understanding that has enabled us to hold on to certain dualities of mind, such as its balance of will and determinism, without erring into paradox. For if no absolute ground can be established, what we hold as finite identity shall always be contextual, taken relationally to a finite context, so that even the distinction between mind and matter can only ever be held meaningfully in counter to its other. As French philosopher Henri Bergson explained, the act of experiencing is an ongoing interfacing from which both world and self arise. In short, as our world gives rise to us, do we give rise to our worlds. But also, crucially, we should take a moment to reflect on the fact that we are no longer required to see the relational flux as some kind of lowest layer or final piece, as if it were some beyond quantum fuzziness or elementary ground floor, since the relationality of nature persists at all levels across all qualities and types. Indeed, it is beginning to appear that relationality may be inseparable from what finite identity expresses. And so I would think that this may prove a fruitful path of inquiry in the chapters to come. For even though consciousness and physicality can be held independently from within these finite frames, we are inevitably compelled to consider a relational frame in which both might act as one, through a shared currency of meaning. Regardless of this lack of evidence for final ground, Western philosophy has historically found it more compelling to settle on one or the other, leaning towards a language of hierarchy, a state that has greatly influenced our approaches to the mind-body dilemma. The philosophy of idealism, for example, chooses to grant priority to the mental, claiming that, as all we know and experience are mental, any interpretation of the physical will always be derivative. Objective idealism makes the claim even more explicit, stating that the individual's mind is merely a part of a universal cosmic mind, whereas the philosophy of materialism offers a counter, suggesting that the mental is a derivative of the physical. But Dual-Aspect Monism is closer to the picture we're trying to unfold here. A philosophy often attributed to Spinoza, whose radical monism held that all nature is of one whole. Nature is God, And as both the mental and physical are equally nature, then all is one with God, i.e., both are merely attributes of some deeper truth. And it is in keeping with this line of thinking that a psychophysically neutral aspect of reality fits. In considering such a metaphysical dovetail between psychology and physics, theoretical physicist Wolfgang Pauli, in his correspondence with psychologist Carl Jung, once wrote, quote, "We must postulate a cosmic order of nature beyond our control, to which both the outward material of objects and the inward images are subject." End quote. What the pair referred to as an acausal reality, a nature beyond materialistic cause and effect. Philosopher Bertrand Russell was another advocate for this neutral form of monism, stating that, quote, "Both mind and matter seem to be composite, and the stuff of which they are composed lies in a sense between the two, in a sense above them both, like a common ancestor." End quote. The difference between Russell's compositional neutral monism and Jung's more decompositional neutral monism is that, for Russell, mind and matter emerge from a shared deeper layer. For Jung and Pauli, however, the mental and the material are neither reducible to one another nor to the neutral order that sits beyond, a non-hierarchical unfolding of wholeness, akin to that offered by David Bohm. This was a theory that both men advanced from their respective positions. Two distinct perspectives drawn from historically opposed fields. As such, the meeting of minds, now known as the Pauli-Jung Conjecture, is a story that I should like to briefly touch upon, not simply because it offers us another example of this unity beyond types, but also because it unfolds a unique framework for appreciating meaning as a form of universal currency, capable of operating across seemingly distinct domains. Working among the greats of 20th century physics, Pauli was widely respected, receiving the Nobel Prize in 1945 after being nominated by Albert Einstein for his contributions to quantum mechanics. Though Jung was originally hesitant, Pauli's epistemological critique turned out to be precisely the influence that he was seeking. Always an advocate for the scientific viability of psychology, Jung considered himself an empiricist, despising the idea that his work was an art. But across several years, Pauli assisted Jung in mapping out his theory for psychophysics, formulating their theory of synchronicity. Psychophysics is simply a field of psychology that deals with the relations between physical stimuli and mental phenomena. But synchronicity is an idea that goes a few steps further. For Jung and Pauli, synchronistic events were the natural consequence of acausal relationships, persisting within a perspective of reality in which neither the mental nor the material hold any hierarchical sway. Jung recorded many instances of spontaneous acausal relationships, temporal synchronized events that entwined an individual's unconscious mind with chance physical events via an inherent force of significant meaning. These were his synchronicities. As dubious as they might sound, most of us will be quite familiar with these synchronicities. And in fact, it's extremely common to find oneself wondering about their hidden meaning. But what is it that makes these chance events anything more than mere coincidence? A coincidence, as we all know, is merely a chance event devoid of any significant meaning that occurs despite its low probability. An example of which could be bumping into a friend at a local cafe after many years apart. It may be nice, but it's unlikely to have much of an influence on the world post-lunch. Whereas synchronicity is taken to be an acausal event connected by meaning itself. So, had you been wrestling with a psychologically significant issue and felt that the only person who could understand it would be that friend with whom you had lost contact with several years ago, and then you were to bump into them at the cafe that afternoon, this would be a synchronicity. Because for Jung, The meaning inherent in a synchronicity was said to exist a priori, outside of humanity, and indeed outside of both mind and matter. And so the concept of synchronicity does not try to dismiss the concept of chance, only to understand how chance and coincidence can influence an environment through a currency of meaning. Though Jung was aware of the speculative nature of his claim, he nonetheless adduced a range of supporting evidence, including statistically significant studies, all of which gave examples of non-causal phenomena that could not be explained by mere mechanical causality. Indeed, it was similar discontinuities that had led physicists like Bohm to contemplate just such an a priori domain. Though where Bohm found wholeness via an understanding of physics, Jung's more famous contribution to the idea was his own dive into the psychological depths. Jung's own personal investigations into the human psyche and the unconscious led him down a strange and curious path. Over a period of 16 years, he privately dissected his own psyche through a series of self-experiments, including free writing, dream mapping, and what he referred to as active imagining, all of which culminated in his private opus, Liber Novus, the Red Book, a book published several decades after his death. His resulting insights, however, led to many of his now famous theories, including his mapping of the conscious and unconscious mind. The conscious, according to Jung, consists of the persona we present to the outer world and the ego, which together serve as the surface layer of our personal experience of self. The unconscious, like the conscious, is also multi-layered, which in its shallowest depths consist of the personal unconscious, being the part of the unconscious structured by our own personal life experiences, and the shadow, the aspect of our psyche that we choose to keep hidden from ourselves, such as our innate potential for horrific violence and so on. But beyond the structures of our personal unconscious is the greater collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is humanity's evolutionary memory bank. In considering the nature of our inherited instincts, such a pool of shared unconscious material makes sense, but perhaps more difficult is the idea that it may also be responsible for reoccurring cultural themes, such as the consistencies that appear in our myths, regardless of cultural divides, be they oceans or eons. But beyond the murky depths of the collective unconscious, do we find ourselves yet again left wanting, open to yet another lack of absolute boundary? For beyond is the realm from which Jung and Pauli suggested that these synchronicities emerge, a psychophysically neutral reality, connected through Platonic-like forms that Jung called the archetypes. These archetypes of the collective unconscious emerge in us individually as the shared narratives of the psyche and collectively as culture. Thus, it is through this currency of personal meaning that an archetype can offer its guiding force, leading individuals towards a state of individuation or wholeness, a state which, according to Jung, is our highest potential. But just as an individual is guided by their own subjective interpretation of meaning, is this unconscious structure of meaning itself thus guided by its more holistic nature, an underlying state of wholeness beyond the mental and the material, a wholeness of which we are all a part. A place which is, quote, a boundless expanse full of unprecedented uncertainty, with apparently no inside and no outside, no above and no below, no here and no there, no mine and no thine, no good and no bad, where I am indivisibly this and that, where I experience the other in myself and the other than myself experiences me. There I am utterly one with the world, so much a part of it that I forget all too easily who I really am." End quote. In his paper on synchronicities, Jung again discusses this nature of contingency, though in a less poetic manner, suggesting that, quote, "It is an initial state which is not governed by mechanistic law, but is the precondition of law, the chance substrate on which law is based." End quote. In Pauli and Jung's metaphysical descriptions of the psychophysically neutral reality, they suggest that the archetypal form is participating in some universal feedback, acting between the psychophysically neutral order, the material and the mental, in much the same way that we experience a feedback happening between the mental and physical during our ordinary day-to-day experience. And it's this feedback that gives rise to acausal synchronicities. In Jung's words, synchronicities could hypothetically be considered, quote, "a factor equal in rank to causality as a principle of explanation," end quote. This claim may appear inordinate. But as we've unpacked ourselves, causality is a principle of explanation that is conjectural at best. The issues surrounding measurement and the probabilistic nature of the material world leave us with little support for the idea that cause and effect are the grand masters of truth. But can we justify a description of reality in which the mental can interact with the physical through some acausal medium? Indeed, how would anyone even begin to test such a hypothesis? Well, as it turns out, experiments attempting to investigate such hidden tendrils of acausal interaction, those acting beyond the macrophysical domain of causality, have been pursued with a scientific rigour for almost a century now. But though these experiments have provided a long list of evidence in support of the idea, it must also be said that all such evidence has ultimately proved inconclusive. At present, the theory has failed to either be confirmed or denied. Controversial, yes, but false, no. And so, this is where we shall allow our pondering to unfold in the next chapter, because it seems that we have finally stumbled into the glitter bomb world of Wu, a land of mystics, magic, and promise, and a great many shiny things. So, fair warning, as we must stride through the terrain of curiosities entertained by the snake oil merchants, if we are to reach the insights we now strongly need. For where science and philosophy dance, there doth lie a metaphysical ballroom. Hi everyone, Sean here. I hope you enjoyed the chapter. I just wanted to drop in here at the end to let you know that the course that we've been working towards over the last few months is now up and ready. So if you are wanting to join up with us and have a discussion on the topics of what is real, what is nature, what are the metaphysical implications of finite identity and so forth, I have devised a course for us. So I'll put a link in the description below. But I'm very excited to share it with you. I'd just like to say thank you very much for your patience over the last month. We did miss an episode, but this is what we've been working on. So I'm super excited to share it with you. All right, that's it. Much love. See you next time.